We're fortunate to be joined by another state champion on today's podcast. He is also the Arizona Cardinals Coach of the Year, 2021 state champion from Casa Grande High School in Arizona, Jake Barro. Jake, it's great to have you here on the podcast.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me on, Coach.
For your school, this was the first one as I read up on it, so that has to be special. And the thing for you, though, is that you've been around this game your whole life. Grandfather was a high school football coach. Your father was a high school football coach. And before we got going, you told me that you've been on a sideline your whole life.
Absolutely. Just like you said, for the school, first state championship ever. I mean, we had the, lower bowl filled at Sun Devil Stadium at Arizona State. I mean, a town of 50,000, stores were shut down. People were at the game. I mean, that side of it was just an unbelievable event for that community. People caravanning down the I-10 to get to the game. It was a special day for the community in general. And myself, and then you can appreciate this as well, being around the game since before I could walk. I think I wrote in my first grade, what you want to be when you grow up, a football coach. This is who I am. It's been who I've been. It's etched in my DNA. To see a community come together like that as someone that's been around the game my whole life and that's seen it, it was something special, and it was something I'll never forget. And you don't see it very often anymore. It's just, small town. We play at, a high level because of our success and population, but it's still small town football. And it was a hell of an experience for me and everybody involved. And just being that kid, going back to being that kid, hanging out on the sidelines, falling in love with this game, to being able to kind of see the plan come together. I mean, it's definitely something special.
Now, I know you told me that your dad is part of the coaching staff, that he's at the very least a consultant for you. I'm sure he gets more involved than that, but how special was it to be able to have him as a part of this as well?
Oh man, it was unbelievable. I mean, it has been. He started coaching with me since I got it around 7 years ago. And he's just retired and loves the game, wants to be around the game, and I want him to be around the game because he knows so much, and he's always in my ear and giving me great advice. And I think, when we were, because it was a heck of a game back and forth, and it ended on an incomplete pass in the end zone. I walked over, I put my arm around our quarterback. We watched the last play together. I hugged him, and then the very next person I even turned to look to was, my dad. And we just kind of shared in that moment together because, we know what all goes into this, the how you build it and what you put into it and how much time it takes away from, your family and coaches, that's the one thing that's kind of the downside. You do take time away from your family to be part of this game and to pour that into kids. And well, for me, to be able to spend it with my family, that was really special. And to be able to have him there on the sideline in that moment was something I'll never forget.
You said that growing up and again, having your grandfather a coach, your father was a coach, that really impacted you on your approach to things. And that for you, it really is a family approach. How do you make it a family approach with the players on your team?
Yeah, growing up, it became what my family was about. It became kind of how we addressed everything. The lessons were taught to me through the game of football at a young age. That's kind of how I learned about life. And so I take that same approach into my profession as a coach with the players that I coach. And, I can tell families when they come to us as a freshman, your son is going to be part of a family, and it's going to really, really feel like that because of my background and because of my approach. And one of the most important things, I think, when it comes to coaching kids like they're your family members is they have to know you. They have to know the real you as a coach, not just the X's and O's, not just what you want them to know. They got to know everything about you. That's your struggles. That's your failures. You have to roll up your sleeves and show them your scars. And, this is who I am. This is the mistakes that I've made. This is what's led me down the path to be where I am right now. And you have to care about them. You have to care about them enough to understand that they're just kids. They're going to make mistakes. You hold them to a standard. You hold them accountable, but you love them. And I think that when you really show who you are to them, and they know that you care about them because you get to know who they really are, their faults, their negative things, just as much as they are a football player. You want to know what makes them tick as a young man. That then you start to create the family type bond that every coach preaches. And it's hard to do. It's not easy. It takes time, and it's a lot of effort. Just as much time as we think it takes to install a new concept, it takes 4 or 5 times as much time to build a true relationship with a kid where they really feel like, you're more to them than a football coach, and they're more to you than a football player. And so just being that kind of kid, growing up in the game and learning those life lessons through the game at a young age, it's a little easier to me, I think. It just kind of comes natural, but it's still the most important thing to me. I think when you use this game in that way and you show who you are to these kids and you accept them for who they are, you get a lot more buy-in, a lot more.
What kinds of things do you do in the off season, maybe even in season, that help to create that bond, that help to create that family approach?
I think a lot of times we'll have team meetings, and this is a lot of focus on the off season, but we'll spend team meetings where I just kind of tell them about a time in my life where maybe I struggled, a time in my life where I made a mistake, something that I thought was, really, really going to set me back. And I just sit and I just talk to them. I talk to them like they're sitting across from me, and it's my own son, and I want them to know something. And then once I kind of show them, maybe a time that I lost a job as a young man because I made a mistake, or I failed a class, or I, dropped out of college and had to re-enroll. I mean, this is all stuff that happened to me, and you share these with kids. And then you go around and you start to notice that the more you do that, the more you have these meetings that really have nothing to do with football. These are just meetings that are us talking. You start to see kids stand up, and the kids share that with them, and you see a little more who they are. This is a problem I'm having at home. And then this is a problem that I'm having in class, and stuff we wouldn't even know if we didn't spend the time to sit down and do that. So we meet like that once a week in the off season. And the kids know it's got nothing to do with football. Leave your notebooks and your iPads away. We're just going to talk. And I'm going to start it because, kids aren't going to do that unless you do. And I'm going to be vulnerable in front of them and let them know who I am. And then, eventually they stand up and they share. And we had a saying a year ago in the off season, who are you? And I would start every meeting by telling them who I am and sharing them something new about me. And after about 2 or 3 weeks of that, I started turning into them. All right, who are you? And I don't want to know who you are as a football player. I don't want to know your 40 time. I don't want to know anything in the weight room. I want to know which position you play. I want to know who you are as a young man. And tell me something I don't know. Tell me something your teammates don't know. And I think we started that saying, who are you? Who are you? Who are you? And we used that through the whole off season. And we really dug into who the kids are as individuals. And not football, who they are as individuals, as young men. And then we got into fall camp. And when we rolled into fall camp, we flipped it. We said, all right, now we're going to stop asking, who are you? We're going to say, who are we? And so when I look at a kid and I call on him and I say, who are we? Now he's saying, who are we as a whole? Who are we as a team? Well, this is what we stand for. This is the standard we hold ourselves to. And everybody has something different. And you kind of come together. And that's when I really saw it click for the first time, this team coming together as a family. We broke them down as individuals as to who they are, and then we got in a room and we're in fall camp now, gearing up for the season. All right, who are we? What makes us special? What makes us unique? We know each other's stories, we know each other's scars, we know who each other really is. What makes us special? What makes us different than any other team in the country? And you sit in a room and you hear everybody's opinions, players' opinions, coaches' opinions, my own. You move forward from that. And, man, the X's and O's are the least of your problem because you got a team that's going to buy in. They're going to give everything they got. And I truly believe that's kind of what propelled us to win in a state championship because we're a school that's never had a lot of success. I mean, when I got there 7 years ago, we hadn't had a winning season in 27 years. We went back-to-back Final Fours the last 2 years. That hadn't happened ever. And then to finally win a state championship this year, I mean, there's a lot of good football coaches that have coached here. Everybody knows the X's and O's, but I think really getting under the skin of our players and really coming up with a team identity that everyone bought into, that made the difference.
Is the approach of, as you described it, really recognizing the individual first something you've always done, or is that something that has been a little bit different for you as you've gotten into this period where you've had a lot of success?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've certainly evolved into doing that. Early on in my coaching career as an assistant, I learned it this way, and I truly believed in it, that football's not a game of individuals, and it's not. Make no mistake about it. It's a team game, but I worked for guys and was coached by guys that, if you want to be recognized as an individual, if you want to have your own talents or issues recognized, then, this ain't the game for you. And that's okay. There is some truth to that. But I think with this generation of kids, I don't think it anymore. I truly believe it. And this is probably something that I evolved into about 3 years ago as a head coach. With this generation of kids, not only do they want to know the why behind everything, but they want to know the why me. And it's not always a bad thing. I think as coaches, we have to embrace it a little bit. And so before you can get them to really buy into the team first, before you can get into getting them to be what you want them to be, get this team to be your vision, to become your vision, I should say, you have to get to know every one of these kids individually. And you have to recognize that individual aspect. And I think from then you transition into, all right, who are we as a team? And then you shift it to, all right, here's the team buy-in, right? This team isn't going anywhere unless it's all of us and it's not the team and we're not holding each other to the team standard. And so I think you certainly have to recognize the individual first with today's generation of kids. I think that's the only way. And then you can shift it into, all right, this is what we are now. We know who each other is. We understand it. I understand it. We love each other. We buy in. Now we're shifting to one common goal as a team. It's a team game. Here we go. Let's go. So I really did evolve into that. It wasn't something I always believed in, but now that I've kind of seen it, I don't think I'll ever go back to any other way of developing players.
When you look at the difficulties of these last 2 years in all kinds of ways, and I truly believe this probably is some of the most difficult times to win a championship in because of all the variables we deal with now, how important was the approach you took to bring these guys together? Do you feel it really carried you where maybe in the past the approach might have stumbled under these kinds of conditions?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, the biggest obstacle for not just myself, every coach in the country was, how the world dealt with COVID over the last couple of years. And, we were no different. In Arizona, school shut down, kind of like everywhere, and football shut down. We lost out on spring football, we lost out on a lot of summer stuff. And so there was probably a good 8 weeks, if not more than that, going into the 2020 season where I didn't see my players face to face. We did the whole Zoom call deal. We checked in, position coaches checked in with them on the phone. Our strength coach was the saddest guy in the world because, there was nothing he could do. And, and that was kind of our reality for 8 to probably more than 2 months. I mean, it was a while. And that was really kind of what shifted me to this approach, this COVID year. Of all the bad things that came out of this year, the one thing I learned is, these kids at the end of the day, they all kind of have their issues. And I got to know them all one-on-one because it was the only way of doing it on the phone. And I realized, man, there's so much about the individual player I never understood before. And now that I'm on the phone with them every day, I'm on Zoom calls with them every day, I'm starting to get to know the individual player. I'm starting to see how they can benefit the team in other ways and how the team can benefit them. And so as challenging as it was, it certainly evolved, or it pushed me to evolve more as a coach in that way, to approach player development differently. And so something that I'll always do is, I'll do it in person now, but I'm always going to sit down and have those one-on-one meetings when it comes to player development in the off season. And what do you want? What do you get? What do you need to get better at? And what do we need to do to get you there? Tell me about your personal life. Tell me about the obstacles in your way. Tell me about everything, and then from there we can shift. So, as tough as these 2 years were, and gosh, I mean, it's one of the toughest years to build a football program ever, because you felt like you didn't have the time, you didn't have the resources. Everybody was running up against the clock. The one good thing was it did help me evolve into learning this type of player development, no doubt about it.
Because let's flip gears here a little bit and get to some of the things that are happening out on the field. You guys have been able to really make a name for yourselves on the field with the use of the wide zone, something that really is the base of your offense. You build everything off of it, screen game, play action, etc. I know you shared with me that a lot of this comes from Alex Gibbs. When you look at this system, I think everybody will adopt something, but uniquely, I think, make it their own. So, you take that basis of the Alex Gibbs outside zone, wide zone type of offense. What kinds of things have really made it the Casa Grande Cougars offense?
We were fortunate to have Alex Gibbs as a resident of Scottsdale, Arizona for a long time. So, taking advantage of that was probably one of the best things we did. But I think what drew me to it as a coach more than anything was not only how versatile it is as a scheme, but the type of linemen that we had that we were going to get, that we got through our program. We were always a little bit undersized, but we were always pretty athletic. We could move. And we thought, well, let's go. I'd love running power, counter, buck sweep as much as the next guy, but let's go with something that we can mold into our offense that can be us, that we can block any front, that they can stun, they can bring pressure, they can play whatever game they want, and try to use us as, use our size against us, so to speak. But we're going to get angles, we're going to get off and moving, and we're going to use our rules and combos to our advantage. And so I think just personnel is what drew me to it, and then seeing it in practice in the game, I mean, that was kind of what really sold me on it. I said, this is going to be what we hang our hat on. And then when we saw it in practice more in the game, we actually got to see it. We saw how effective it was. Effective for our personnel specifically, effective against the fronts we see, and just, it's consistent. That's my favorite thing about the scheme. It's consistent. Mm-hmm. You're never gonna go broke making a profit, and so we can consistently move the football, running the wide zone. So the next year after we first installed it, it kind of became who we are. And now, you play us, you're gonna get a heavy dose 25, 30 times a game wide zone. It's gonna be out of different looks. We dress it up, 11, 12 personnel, shift to it, motion away from it, tag RPOs, backside, single receiver boundary stuff. But the base scheme in the box, you're going to get a wide zone look. That's become us. It's become what we're known for, and I'm such a believer in it because of the consistency of the play and the effectiveness of it, and it protects everything else. You protect it with your pocket movements, your boots, your play actions, and you protect it with your screen game. And it, when you have that, that trifecta, I believe it's the most effective run scheme in football.
Well, I think a lot of people would agree with you out there, and you see it all over the league now. The most successful teams are those wide zone based teams. You'll see a ton of play action with it. But I think there's something you said there, definitely the type of personnel. And, we had a very similar experience when we put it in. Those athletic linemen, guys who can move, not necessarily road graders who are going to knock people off the ball, but because they can move, because they're athletic, you really start to get a distortion on the defense. And if everything's set up off of the wide zone, you're going to start to see that flow, that distortion right away, even when you're coming back the other way with the quarterback on a naked or something like that. Really starts to separate the defense and create those running lanes for you. And I can remember back to, our first or second year of running, and had a lineman come off the field all distraught because, coach, they're calling it out every play. They're calling, they're calling watch the stretch play or watch the zone play. I was like, well, it's a good thing they didn't say naked, or they'd have our whole offense. I'm like, it's not about trying to trick them. It's about execution, and it's about repping it over and over so that they're prepared. Because I agree, it handles a lot of things. I remember the first game, we utilized the offense. We're preparing for an even front the whole time. They come out in an odd front, and we didn't skip a beat, right? Because we had all the answers built in.
100%. I couldn't agree with you more. That happened to us through the playoffs that quite a few times. We saw a different front than what we had broken down on film. I mean, in the semifinal game, we broke down 9 games of film on this team, and we saw a different front than any of that. I mean, these guys came out with, they were an odd front team throughout. They went even on us. It wasn't something huge, but it did not phase us one bit. Center makes his call, and we're going. And it didn't change a thing. But, yeah, and I can't agree with you more either on, the play and why it's so effective. You get that distortion from the defense. You get a linebacker to, play one gap over, and you got him. You've got the play. And I think, you teach the line their rules, you teach them their footwork, everything's good, their combos, their calls, and then you teach the running back vision. And when that really clicks and you have a running back that's a true zone back, a wide zone back specifically, that has that vision and can kind of lead those linebackers to playing one gap over or making a false read because of his footwork or his eyes, and then cut that up, it really just changes the scheme and changes the game. And you protect your backside, like you said, with your play actions and stuff. And we had a quarterback that was great at that because we're a big wide zone to the boundary team. And our quarterback's really good at tagging stuff to the field and protecting that backside, outside backer, widening him out a little bit and making him a non-issue. So now we're just trying to get the mic to play one gap over, one thing wrong, and we're going to cut this thing up and we're going to go. And it's going to be 4, 5, 6 at a time, and then we will break one on you because you start to get frustrated and you start to take one step too far. Then that naked, that's the one, then you break that naked. It's kind of always the way it goes. You're hitting 4, 5, 6 yards of the crack, and then naked to the field, and you're gone. So, yeah, it's a scheme I believe in. I love it, and I couldn't have said it better. That's what makes it go.
The other thing that I think is important to using a scheme like that is what you mentioned with training the vision of the back. And I've shared this before on this podcast. The answer I got when I was sitting down and clinicking with somebody on this was, Coach, what do you do, if he's not seeing it? He's like, put another back in. I'm like, well, this is our dude, and he's really good. I don't know if I'm putting that next guy in right away. So that led to us really studying the play and looking at what are the scenarios that are going to happen to this back on his track as he's running this wide zone track that we could start to train in drills. And, you hear it all the time. You should build your drills off of the things that are going to happen in the game, not just creating these fancy drills that, they might look good on YouTube and whatever, but where do they happen on the field? So for us, it was studying the film and saying, okay, he's going to get a look where you're going to see the edge. He's going to have his guys who have reached everybody, and he's just going to go and get to the outside and hit the numbers, and he'll cut it up. He's going to get the situation where he starts to see color showing on the outside half of that blocker who's on his track, right? And we'd always start him. For us, the aim point was 1 yard deep, 3 yards wide outside the tight end or the ghost tight end, a really wide track for us. And if he started to see that color showing, he was just going to press right up to it, and then he cut off of it, right? A lot of times, if you're patient with it and you're staying on the track, the blocks will really start to declare themselves and make it even easier. I think the backs who struggle the most are not. It's not necessarily because of any kind of physical ability. It's because they're impatient, right? That you just really have to stay on that track. And then the best ones really, after they start to see that, those first two scenarios that I'm mentioning, that they can really start to play with those level 2 defenders to get them to move, right? With their eyes or with a little head and shoulder fake to then be able to cut up inside and get back out. And then I mentioned the 2 scenarios there. The third one was just unblock color in your path, which if we told him we saw that, you get as close to it as you can and then cut on his weak side shoulder. That guy has momentum. Keep his momentum going. Don't freeze him right there and really give him a situation where he's square now and momentum has stopped and he can go either direction on you. Keep his momentum going and try to rip through that, get vertical, and then get back outside of your blockers. And that repetition of those 3 things for our tailback over and over and over again really train not only that guy, but every running back within our system, that they could run that play and be effective for us. Was the second guy as good as the first, or the third as good as those guys? No, not always. but we knew that whoever we put in there, we were going to have an effective play.
Yeah, I mean, we teach it the exact same way. I mean, you nailed it. That's the key. And I think why the play's been so consistent for us is exactly what you said. You can fill in different running backs, and they can all be effective as long as they have that vision down and they're patient. I think the biggest, when you're training a zone back, it's different than anything else. You have to train the patience through the mesh point. You have to train the patience through the read. And we teach the same thing. We're attacking that, inside leg of the tight end or the ghost tight end. And we're reading that combo to play side backer. And he's going to either, he's going to be patient and press that that play side tight end combo as easy, as quick as he can. He's going to get there, and then he's going to make his decision. And we want him in second gear in the backfield until he makes that decision. When he's going to cut up, he's going to cut wide and then cut up, whatever, or cut back if it's an unblocked color, like you said. Once he makes that decision, then he cranks that into fourth gear and goes. But the patience is so key. That really is what makes this play go. And I mean, we just that's kind of how we train our backs now, and we can run 2 or 3 backs if we need to because they understand their reads, they understand what they're looking at. It's not necessarily, the speed guy that we need to, we can only run this play with. No, it can be effective with different types of personnel, no doubt about it.
The other thing I really liked about the play, and really this became a huge part of my philosophy of running an offense, was that you need a starting point play in your offense. I'm not talking like people talk a base play or a base set of plays. I mean, this one play is going to start the look for us. It's how we formation it, what the play looks like on initial footwork. I mean, if you looked at, and I used to share it in clinics, if you looked at the handful of plays we run, and initially it was, we ran the wide zone, we ran the tight zone, we ran a mid zone version of it, and initially we kept trap and counter from our old offense, kind of security blanket things for us.
Right.
But eventually we discarded the trap in the counter, and we would even run some counters off of the wide zone where we just, instead of everybody stretching, we leave that backside tackle to pass set, and it would create this huge, it looked like a sprint draw, but truthfully it was just stretching. He ran back to the void there. But with that play, and what I'm getting to is everything was set up to look the same, in that if you looked at the first 3 steps of any single play in our offense, run game and play action, it all looked like stretch. And that becomes very hard to diagnose, right? If you get to those really good teams who can read keys, and maybe you're running, wing T, I think ran that for a while, and we'd struggle against those teams who knew and were good at just reading our guards. The guards will take you to the play, right? And that's not the situation that you get with an offense like this when you can make everything look the same. So to me, that's key. And I think it's easy to do with wide zone, but what I'm saying is in any offense, what play starts things for you?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, when we look at when I as a play caller, look at our script, I mean, it's basically our coming out script is peppered with wide zone at a bunch of different looks. Wide zone, shift here, wide zone. We're gonna run wide zone. We're gonna manipulate our backside splits, see how that affects it. We're gonna manipulate our tight end split and run wide zone. We're gonna motion away and run wide zone. We're gonna, start and empty, motion and back, run wide zone. I mean, it's kind of your starting play to diagnose a defense.
Yes.
I mean, it really is. And so that first quarter, first 2 drives are over, and you're able to look and we're check out in high school. We're lucky to check out that replay system and take a look and say, all right, we gave them the same look in the box, same look up front. How did these other wrinkles, these other things we threw at them, how did that affect them? And it's how you diagnose what their defensive game plan is, what they're going to do, how they're going to line up to you. And I think you can find an advantage relatively quickly because it's just like you said, everything does look the same. So you're really putting the onus on them to make a change, them to declare what they're going to try to do to stop you, and makes life as a play caller a heck of a lot easier when it's not just, they read our guards, they read our keys here. We have to know what they have to tell us what they're doing because everything looks the same. And if they don't want to change, we're going to keep running it at them. That's fine with us.
Definitely. You mentioned to me practice, very important to you too, and that making your players situationally aware is an important part of it. And you think about this game, it's always played within context, but I think we get guilty. I know I have get guilty of it as coaches, where we're out there running plays, but we're not telling the players like what's the situation we're running this play in, right? And eventually I got much better at that as a coach. I could think as a young coach, though, we're out in team and just running plays in team, and we're not saying what down and distance is. We're not thinking about different types of things where players who can understand how things also fit in context, I think, have that football IQ and are going to do some things that you need them to do when you get into those critical situations.
Yeah, amen. Situational football has kind of become what our practices, our in-season practices look like. And when I say that, I mean our quarterback, when it's 3rd and 3 and I have 11 personnel on the field with him, he knows I'm going to give him one of 2 or 3 things. When we're in the red zone on the right hash, and we want to go 3 by 1 to the field, he knows I'm going to give him 2 or 3 things. We've practiced this situation over and over. He knows the way I think, what I want in this situation, what I feel is effective in this situation, and we know what to do. And we just work it all the time. I like you said, the game's played within context. And as a young coach, first years as an offensive coordinator, I'd have a play script, and I'd say this is what team is going to look like, and we'd just run them. And then we'd get through it and we'd go, okay, well, when are we going to run this? Why? And then why? It brings you back to that why. And so then, I really started to learn from other guys and get more into how you build situations into your practice and how you teach it. And that becomes our team sessions now are, this is the scenario, this is where we're at, what are we going to do? And we get to the point now where quarterback can read my mind because he knows this is what I want in this situation. This is what I think's effective. And an example of that is, we were in the quarterfinals this year, and we actually were down 2 points. Yeah, we were down 2 points with 27 seconds to go. They had just went for 2. Or I'm sorry, we were down 1 point. They had just went for 2 to win the game, and they got it. And with 27 seconds left, our chances weren't looking real good. So they kicked the ball back to us. We were fortunate they kicked that thing out of bounds, so we got in a pretty good spot. And our kids, our quarterback, our kids knew exactly what to do. 27 seconds left to go. We're on our own 35. We know this situation. We've been here in practice. We didn't have people in the stands, and the pressure wasn't up, but we were here in practice. So our quarterback, he knew exactly ball's on the right hash. This is where we're looking to get to the short side, get out of bounds, pick up a couple first downs, and then we kicked a field goal to win the game. That's how that thing ended and moved us on to the semis. But that's the example I'll probably use for the rest of my career. We had been in that situation. We had been in it 3 or 4 times. It was just in practice. And it was explained to them, this is why we're doing it. To set up the field goal, our quarterback threw a ball over the middle of the field on a crossing route that really was supposed to just hold that safety, but he was open. He threw the ball. Our receiver caught the pass and immediately before taking another step got down on the ground so we could get a timeout and kick the ball with 1 second left. These are situations we've practiced. He knew exactly what to do. So, like I said, that's probably the perfect example. And it's an example I'll use for future teams for the rest of my life. But if we hadn't been over that over and over and over, I just don't think we go down and get in field goal range with 27 seconds left and 1 timeout. Just wasn't looking good.
It's important for everybody to have that football IQ for you, and definitely something you can train into them. So, Coach, you've mentioned in this podcast the word evolve. You said the word evolve several times here when talking about yourself as a coach. And I know you believe that's so important to be a successful coach, that it is looking at how you can evolve. Talk to us about, I guess, the best advice you can give a coach out there who wants to be able to experience the kind of success you guys had this year.
Yeah, the best advice that I can give and will always give is reinvent yourself each year as a football coach. Who you are as a coach, you always have to be aware of who you are, what you believe in, what are your core beliefs, and keep those core beliefs because that makes you you. But always, always, always address with yourself how you teach those beliefs, how you convey them to your team. and X's and O's wise. Is this the best way I teach this scheme? Is this the best way we practice it? What can we do better? If I had stayed the same coach that I was 3 years ago, we wouldn't have had this success this year. There's no way. There's absolutely no way, because there was a heck of a lot of things that I was doing ineffectively. And I had to sit and reinvent myself and say, look, this is how I'm going to teach this scheme better. This is how I'm going to develop players better, because I think player development really is the key to success, whether it's your youth kids you're bringing in or it's the players already within your program, how you develop them in the months of January and then through to fall camp. That's what makes you. That's what makes your program successful. But, sit down and look and focus on yourself and what you need to do better. I think it's very easy when we find success as coaches, through winning or getting a new job or something, to feel like we've figured it out. We've got that recipe to success down. And that's not the case. I mean, we went 14-0 and won a state championship this year, and there's a lot of things that I need to do better as a football coach. And I'm in the process right now of sitting down and how do I reinvent myself? How do I get better at things? How do I convey my message better? How do I develop play? How do I work better with our strength coach and working with the program? And how do I help these players reach their potential? Because there's a lot of better we can do. So that's my advice. I'll always continue to evolve. Stick by what you believe, stick by what makes you, but always evolve in how you teach that, how you get that message out, and how you develop your players.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. We definitely live in that copy and paste world now, where it's always easy to look at what somebody did here and think it'll work over there. But this is not a copy and paste profession. I couldn't agree more with you. So, Coach, when you look at all the things you do, and you've mentioned some great things here on the field, off the field, how you build team, what's the one thing you do as a coach that you feel really gives your team the winning edge?
I think, it's kind of was unintentional, but this interview is kind of circled around player development. And I think that's the one thing that's my strength as a head coach that gives our players the winning edge, and I kind of mentioned it actually before. The month of January through July, the way you develop your players then through that time is, I think, what's going to give you that winning edge. We can all show up to fall camp with a great plan and an install plan in place and how we're going to teach things. And I can go to University of Alabama and I can sit and watch how they install and take the greatest, practice plan in the world. But if I didn't develop my players, I think that's important, my players, because everybody's different. My players are different than yours. Yours are different than yours and his and hers and whose ever. And we have to come up with a unique plan to develop our players to fit the team and to help the team and to be what we want. So, and I don't want to get too into the weeds on this, but I think player development and how I talked about developing and getting to know them as an individual first, and identifying strengths and weaknesses as individuals, and then taking them going into fall camp and bringing that in as a whole, as a team. I think coaches that focus more on player development and then transition into program development in that order will be successful. That's my belief. Everybody has a different one, but that's mine. I think coaches that do it the opposite, and I used to be this coach. I used to have a vision for my program, what I wanted it to be, and then I would try to fit the kids to my program vision. I was more about program development, and then I let player development kind of fill in the gaps later on. Well, I've learned that's not the case. You can't do that, at least not with today's kids. You have to develop them as young men, as individuals first, and then you put that into your program, and that's what's going to give you the edge. That's what's going to help you win and realize your vision at the end of the day. I just truly believe that.
Coach, what's the best way for our listeners to connect with you?
Follow me on Twitter, at Coach Barro, Barro. There's no W there. It's Coach Barro on Twitter. I'm on Twitter my players make fun of me. I'm on Twitter more than they are. Follow me, shoot me a DM. I love to connect with coaches. I'd love to see what teams are doing, shoot ideas, and man, I live on that damn website these days, so follow me there.
Well, Coach, I really appreciate you taking the time, and best of luck to you and your team as you evolve into what you're going to be in 2022.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.